So Ben Simmons had a moment at Sixers Media Day where he says if he's open, he will shoot three-pointers. And I think this is pretty interesting, besides the obvious of it's potentially the difference between Ben Simmons being maybe the best player in the league and being whatever he is right now, we'll just say like 19th without really thinking about it. But I think it's also a little deeper than that in the sense of how it affects Philly, and I think his mental side of the game comes into this. So I guess my first prediction is, do I actually believe him and that he will shoot threes? Yes, I do. I think if teams leave Ben Simmons wide open from three, which of course they're going to do, he will attempt it. Now, I think it's probably going to be one of those things where he's got to think about it for a second, and he's got to make sure his form is really good and all that. But that's still progress nonetheless, right? So there's that. In terms of moving jump shots, pull-up jumpers, any type of pull-up three, or if somebody goes under the screen on him, if the Sixers run more pick and rolls, I don't think those things are really going to happen. I mean, he might attempt them, but I just don't think they're really going to work like that. I think the best bet would be some kind of like 12-foot pull-up thing where he's flying to the side or something like that. Which I guess is still progress, but, you know, I've said this before, I think for Ben, a lot of it's going to come from, like, floaters and things like that, and given how tall he is, you'd think he can hit some floaters from distance, but strictly speaking on the threes a little bit more now. How good do I think he's actually going to be on these? I mean, not that good. Like, if he's attempting, let's say he attempts 1.5 threes a game, I could see him shooting like 30% or even 25%, somewhere in there. I guess it could also be one of those things where he actually shoots like 38%, but he takes like 0.7 a game or something. I don't know. I'm not expecting Ben Simmons to be some impact player from three. And that's only regular season. I mean, playoffs is a whole different monster, of course. I also want to see how Ben Simmons approaches this mentally. For one, I could picture him taking less threes as the season goes along. I think he's definitely going to have it on his mind the first whatever games of the year. But what I hope doesn't happen with Ben is that I hope he doesn't think about shooting a three before a game starts and then he immediately goes to it the moment he has an opportunity to do it. Like, he's still a guy who can just barrel his way to the rim. If you give him enough room and just allow him to get that runway, then he could finish through almost anybody. Now, Philly's spacing or lack of spacing is going to be really interesting this season, and all that's going to play a toll, of course. But another thing is also, like, if teams leave him wide open, I still hope he does the thing that he did a little bit with JJ Redick, which was those handoff plays, because it's basically 2v1 with a really good shooter. Now, whether that's doing that with Tobias or Josh Richardson or potentially even Al Horford, where maybe Ben throws it to Al and then immediately runs to get the handoff from Al or something like that, I don't know. There's just a lot of stuff you can do there, and I hope the go-to isn't Ben Simmons just trying to prove that he can make threes. I guess to use an example, like kind of like Lonzo, where, like, we all know the shooting with Lonzo, it is what it is. But he's also attempted quite a few throughout his career up to this point. I mean, his rookie season, he attempted, 6 threes a game or something? Yeah, he basically attempted 6, and last season he took 5 per game. And, you know, part of it is like, okay, good for you, Lonzo, that you're confident enough to take them, and for what it's worth, his percentage is improved. But I don't think Ben Simmons is going to be like that. I also hope he isn't, because again, you still got to do the thing that makes you really good. So we'll see about all that. I would say some of that definitely ties into the mental side, how Ben Simmons approaches things. And I feel like when we're looking at it like that, there's 2 things that are noticeable about Ben Simmons. One is that he's a smart player, okay? When you're as good of a playmaker as he is, and the way that he reads defenses and finds holes in the defense, whether it's to finish at the rim or to pass the ball, you got to be really smart to do that stuff. And while you could argue his second season wasn't as good as his first defensively, I do think he's shown a defensive mind nonetheless. So the dude's definitely thinking the game on a level that is above the average player. And so as a result of that, you'd think he walks into things and he says, okay, even if I'm a little more confident in my three-point shot, I know that that's not always the most efficient shot I can take. So there's that. But another side of the mental stuff with Ben Simmons is he's kind of full of himself. It's this level of arrogance that the dude carries around, and maybe it's just, being a little introverted or whatever, but he does kind of give off the, I'm better than everybody else vibe. And maybe that'll lead to him being like, I'll show you guys I can make threes, or maybe it'll actually allow him to kind of not care as much if he misses a few in a row. So, I don't know, it could help him, it could hurt him, it could have no impact whatsoever. I don't even know if it's really possible for us to know that, unless he reveals something in an interview. But, I think that's something worth at least mentioning when we're trying to project where he can be as a shooter. I think another thing is also, will this translate to his free throws at all? Because you have to assume if a guy's going to be more comfortable with his shooting in general, that he will be more comfortable with shooting free throws. Perhaps his percentage will improve. His percentage did go up from year 1 to year 2, from 56% on 4 a game to 60% on 5.5 a game. And, could that even lead to him driving to the basket more if we want to get real psychological? I don't know. I mean, Ben Simmons has never seemed like a guy who was really afraid to drive, but that could be a thing. The idea of this dude who just knows in the back of his head, well, if they foul me, I don't really know how I'm going to do there, so maybe I'll hold off on a drive or two, right? Or maybe you just, instead of accepting contact, you kind of twist your body in the air a certain way to just go for the layup. Maybe that could be a byproduct of all this as well. Maybe not, but it's all certainly pretty interesting if you ask me. Again, my prediction, if we're going to go straight stats, I think Ben Simmons will attempt 1.5 threes a game this season, and he'll shoot 29%. I don't know. And then playoffs, it will go back to being basically a non-factor. And I don't want that to sound as if I'm thinking Philly can't go to the finals. I mean, I know in my way too early Eastern Conference prediction video, I predicted the Bucks to beat the Sixers. But I'm still thinking about that every day. And, there's definitely a case to be made for Philly going all the way to the finals with their size and Embiid just potentially being better than anybody else in a playoff series, and if Ben can figure things like this out, and Horford, Richardson, Tobias, if all that comes together. So, yeah, do not interpret my potential cynicism towards Ben Simmons as a shooter as me suggesting Philly doesn't have a chance to go really, really far this season.